Some stars of a popular auction show took a break at Kiole and never returned to your screens.
My dad, 6 months ago, was diagnosed with lung cancer. He's been smoking for 30 years. And last night, he passed away in his sleep peacefully from complications.
Some of the biggest losses connected to storage wars happened long after the auctions ended. While millions of viewers watched the cast chase hidden treasures, several familiar faces were quietly fighting battles that fame, money, and television success could never fix.
So, Daryl, me, were there at the very beginning of it, and we worked together for probably over 100 episodes.
One even warned the world how he believed his life would end, but almost nobody listened until it was too late. So which Storage Wars stars are no longer with us? And what really happened in the final chapters of their lives? Join us as we remember the cast members who sadly passed away. Join us as we remember the Storage Wars cast members who sadly passed away. Moe Prigoff.
I brought you a couple pieces of art.
All right. Oh, you got a nice Alexander Calder here. Well, that's a beautiful piece. This is from a series he did.
Morris Prigoff drove a different car to every auction every single time. 6'2", always dressed like he had somewhere important to be after. The other buyers were loud, competitive, and all business. And then there was Morris Prigoff. He walked in and made it feel like a party. They called him the Doc. By day, he ran a podiatry practice in North Dallas. By the weekend, he was at a storage auction in Texas, making the whole place feel like a reunion. His patients didn't just respect him, they said being in the same room as him made the visit worth it. One of his patients, after learning of his passing, wrote that in 63 years of seeing doctors, Morris was by far the finest she had ever known. That was the man who showed up to Storage Wars, Texas, and turned it into something warm. He had grown up in Syracuse, New York, one of 3 children, the kind of kid whose curiosity never really settled. He did his undergraduate degree at the University of Syracuse, then pushed further, earning his medical degree from the Ohio College of Podiatric Medicine. He worked with the Dallas Chaparrals basketball team, sponsored the American Heart Association and the March of Dimes, and somewhere in the middle of all of it, he fell in love with antiques. He opened River Regency Modern, a mid-century furniture and antique store in Dallas, and the pieces he loved too much to sell went straight into the yard at home, much to Michaela, his wife's frustration. Michaela. He called her his wife for life, and he meant it. 19 years of marriage. 19 years of her watching him collect cars, antiques, and the attention of every room he walked into. When Storage Wars, Texas came calling, Michaela was right there in the background, keeping things grounded while her husband became a fan favorite for a whole new audience. What viewers saw on screen was the real Morris. His partnership with Mary Padian, a fellow buyer the show paired them with repeatedly, produced some of the warmest moments Storage Wars, Texas ever aired. Fans didn't just like them together, they wrote about them. What fans didn't see was that around 2015, Morris received a diagnosis that his family chose never to make public. Storage Wars. Texas played on in reruns while Morris fought in private. Michaela never left his side. She cared for him at home through all of it, right up until the morning of March 4th, 2021, when Morris Michael Prigoff passed away at the age of 78. The illness was never publicly named. His family kept it that way, and that choice says everything about what mattered to them. What matters is that a man who spent nearly 5 decades healing strangers spent his final chapter being loved by the people closest to him. A childhood friend, Jim Wilson, who had known Morris since 1942, nearly 79 years, said he missed him every day. One of his former patients wrote that she used to watch his reruns on difficult days just to hear him laugh, because somehow that was enough to make the world feel normal again. The show found him when he was already in his late 60s. That turned out to be not nearly enough time. But Morris at least had decades of life that the cameras missed. The next man on this list had barely stepped into the spotlight when everything was taken from him. And the only person who really captured what the loss meant was his son, in a video he posted from a hospital room. Gunter Nezhoda.
Fishing rods. Okay, no belly bumping, please.
Is this a good fishing rod?
I'm just gonna say average on these is 100 a piece.
Gunter Nezhoda came to Storage Wars because his son asked him to. Gunter was born in Austria, spent 10 years in Germany, and eventually found his way to Las Vegas, where he settled. He played bass guitar alongside musicians like George Lynch and Pat Travers, names that meant something in the world of rock and roll. He picked up a camera and built a photography portfolio that ended up in advertising campaigns for Microsoft and Ford. He acted in small films that don't come with red carpets or reviews, but he did anyway, because creating things was simply what he did. Moe Nezhoda joined the show in Season 4 alongside his wife, Casey. They ran a thrift store called Bargain Hunters in Poway, California, and on the show, they went by the same name. Then, starting in Season 8, Moe brought his father along, and the difference was noticeable. Gunter wasn't trying to compete. He was just there, watching his son work and laughing when something was funny, and giving his honest opinion when someone asked. Fans noticed immediately. Moe, talking about his dad, said he was one of the only people on Storage Wars who never got any hate from the audience. In this age of social media, where reality television personalities attract criticism, that was no small achievement. Gunter Nezhoda simply existed on that screen to make people feel good. They had even filmed an episode together for the upcoming 14th season. There were more chapters ahead. Neither of them knew it was the last one. Then came September 2022. Gunter was diagnosed with lung cancer. Moe would eventually tell his Instagram followers that his father had smoked for 30 years and that the damage, when the doctors finally saw it, was irreversible. They were hopeful that with treatments, they could buy more time. Moe said nothing publicly. He kept it private, the way his father always had. But the cancer moved faster than hope. The chemotherapy created lesions throughout Gunter's lungs. Doctors eventually delivered the news that every family dreads. There was nothing more that could be done. Gunter flew to Salt Lake City for emergency surgery as a final measure. It was not enough. On March 21st, 2023, with his youngest son, Ricky, by his side in a hospital room in Utah, Gunter Nezhoda passed away peacefully in his sleep. He was 67 years old. Moe posted a video on Instagram that same day. He didn't read from a script or compose himself into something presentable. He talked about the person he learned everything from, who was suddenly gone. He said he hoped his father was somewhere dancing with his mother, and there was no more pain. He thanked the fans for their love, and then he put the phone down. The internet, which is usually merciless, was gentle that day, because Gunter had never given it a reason to be anything else. Gunter Nezhoda got 67 years and a peaceful goodbye. The next cast was 40 years old, at the peak of everything he had built, and on a Sunday evening in February, his fiancée left him alone in his office because he seemed to be doing better. She never saw him again. Mark Balelo.
Mark Balelo, the A&E reality TV star of the show Storage Wars, has died at the age of 40. According to TMZ, he was found yesterday inside the garage.
The first thing you noticed about Mark Balelo was the money. Not because he talked about it, even though he did, but because of what it looked like when he walked into an auction. The tailored clothes, the confidence that preceded him through the door, the way he carried himself like someone who had already calculated every angle in the room before anyone else had taken their first bid. Brandy Passante called him Rico Suave, and it never left him. And the numbers backed the image. He built Balelo Inc. from scratch, an asset acquisition and liquidation company that handled everything from wholesale distribution to full estate sales. He could speak 5 languages. He had spent 17 years in automotive sales, rising to become one of the top Mercedes-Benz performers in the country, before pivoting entirely to build something of his own. By the time Storage Wars found him in Season 2, he was buying more than 150 storage units a week. His net worth was estimated at over $500,000. He had an auction house, a gaming store, a fiancée he adored, and a seat on one of the most-watched reality shows on television. He was 40 years old, and it looked, by every measure, like he was just getting started. But there was another side of the story that didn't show up in the bids, or the suits, or the television appearances. Mark had been in trouble with the law before the show found him. A 2007 drug arrest resulted in a guilty plea and 60 days in jail in 2009. A probation violation sent him back for another 45 days in 2011. These were not small things, but Mark had kept them separate from his public identity. He moved through the world as though the difficult chapters were behind him, and for a while they appeared to be. On the morning of February 9, 2013, Mark was arrested outside his auction house on charges of methamphetamine possession. He was released the same day. What happened over the next 48 hours would end everything. He was released, and then he called his fiancée, Elizabeth, and told her that he was afraid he might hurt himself. She came, sat with him at his auction house in Simi Valley for hours. They talked, reminding him of everything beautiful, including their children. At some point, the fears seemed to pass. He slept, and when he woke, he appeared calmer. Elizabeth felt it was safe to leave. She left Sunday evening. Monday morning, one of his employees arrived at Balelo Inc. and found Mark in his car inside the closed garage, the engine still running. He was 40 years old. The Ventura County Medical Examiner ruled the cause of death asphyxiation by carbon monoxide. The coroner confirmed it as a suicide. The toxicology showed no drugs in his system. The tributes came quickly. Dan Dotson, the voice of Storage Wars, posted on social media that his heart went out to Mark's small children, his family, and Elizabeth. The children, a detail that most coverage buried in a footnote, were real, and their father was gone. Elizabeth wrote on Mark's Facebook page that he had lived for the people around him, that friendship and family were everything to him, that he would have been overwhelmed by the love that poured in after the news broke. What makes Mark's story particularly hard to sit with is the timing. He was being positioned to replace Dave Hester as the show's central antagonist. There was more television ahead, more auctions that might have translated into something even bigger. All of it ended on a Sunday evening in Simi Valley, in the hours between one phone call and the next morning. He deserved more time. His children deserved more time. And the version of him that the cameras caught is the version worth remembering. Mark Balelo was on television for 2 seasons before the cameras moved on. Daryl Sheets was there for 15 years. And in 2018, right in the middle of all those seasons, he posted something on Instagram that nobody took seriously. Until now. Daryl Sheets. In June 2018, Daryl Sheets posted on Instagram that depression was the devil's way of attacking a person. It knew no mercy and took a person's smile. It came and went without warning, ruined relationships, stole happiness, led to suicide in some cases, and never, not for a single day, gave the person carrying it any rest. He called it a 24/7 battle. He called it very real. He ended with a request. The next time someone told another person they were struggling with depression, just be kind. Because that person was spending every minute they had breathing, suffering. 8 years later, on April 22nd, 2026, Daryl was found dead at his home in Lake Havasu City, Arizona. He was 67. The medical examiner confirmed suicide. The man had told the world what he was carrying, and the world had kept scrolling.
So is this unit gonna be fire? Come on! Woo! That's fire!
That is fire. A lot of wardrobe boxes.
I will tell you one thing about this locker. They took pride.
The 163 episodes he gave to that show. The Elvis Presley newspaper collection, worth $90,000, was pulled from a locker nobody else wanted. That was Daryl, always betting on the thing everyone else walked past. All of it was real, and existed with the version of Daryl that was in a quiet, relentless fight with his own mind. Daryl had been addicted to the high of storage auctions for 32 years before Storage Wars ever found him. He arrived on the show in Season 1, 2010, and immediately carved out a space that belonged entirely to him. Daryl was the gambler in the truest sense. He bet large, lost with style, won with even more, and made every locker feel like the most important one he had ever opened. His son Brandon appeared alongside him through seasons 1 to 9, and the dynamic between them gave the show some of its most human moments. Then 2019 arrived, and the body started sending warnings the mind had long been ignoring. In March of that year, Daryl was hospitalized after suffering what he initially described as a mild heart attack. It was not mild. His artery was 95% blocked, the kind of blockage doctors call the widowmaker. He also had congestive heart failure, a severe lung issue, and, as he later disclosed, diabetes. He had been sick for months before the collapse, choosing to push through rather than slow down. Surgery followed, and stents were placed. He described the whole experience afterwards with a mix of relief and disbelief. He had been 2 days from death, he said, and had not known it. He stepped back from the show. He relocated from Southern California to Lake Havasu City, Arizona, and opened a store called Havasu Show Me Your Junk.
And recently opened a new business there. It's called Show Me Your Junk.
That's a good name. He sells a massive inventory of his items at the shop.
Still hunting, still buying, just on a quieter scale. He made occasional appearances in seasons 13, 14, and 15, but the full-time version of Daryl Sheets had already said his real goodbye in 2019, even if no one had called it that yet. In the weeks before his death, Daryl had been posting publicly on social media about being targeted online. He was being bullied, and his last Instagram post was in December 2025. His last Facebook post was in February 2026. Then, 2 months later, at approximately 2 in the morning on April 22nd, officers from the Lake Havasu City Police Department responded to a call at a residence on Chandler Drive. They found Daryl at the scene and pronounced him dead. The investigation into allegations of cyberbullying was opened that same day. His phone was submitted for forensic analysis. The toxicology report, released weeks later, showed no drugs or alcohol in his system. Just a man who had been in pain for a very long time and finally decided to rest. His Storage Wars family responded, even though the circumstances were hard to bear. Gunter Nezhoda, who had lost his own father to cancer just 3 years earlier, posted a video the same day. He spoke about cyberbullying with the kind of controlled grief that only comes from someone trying to do right by a person they genuinely loved. He said Daryl would have wanted something positive to come out of it. Brandy Passante wrote that she was at a loss for words, that her heart ached for Brandon, for Daryl's daughter Tiffany, for his ex-wife, Kimber. She disclosed that she had lost a parent and a brother to similar circumstances. She told anyone who was struggling that the grief from suicide was endless, that they were not taking their pain away when they made that choice. They were transferring it. She asked them to ask for help.
Why didn't you bid higher, Daryl, if you know all that?
Because I extended the olive branch to you, brother, and I expect you to do the same thing.
Dave Hester said that Daryl had brought out the best in him on screen. They were rivals who respected each other. In over 100 episodes together, the competition between them had been real, and so had the friendship. He would be greatly missed. A&E released a statement saying they were saddened by the passing of a beloved member of their Storage Wars family. The last known photograph of Daryl Sheets shows him standing outside his antique store in Lake Havasu, smiling with a fan. It was taken hours before his death. He looks like a man at peace, which is either the most comforting thing about that image or the most devastating. He was the original, the one who made the first season feel like something worth watching, the one who, 32 years into a life spent betting on storage lockers, still found things worth getting excited about inside abandoned spaces that everyone else had already walked away from. Something is fitting about that. A man who spent his life finding value in forgotten things, who perhaps never fully believed that same value existed in himself. Daryl Sheets was not just a television personality. He was a father, a grandfather, a man who wrote about depression on a Tuesday in June and hoped someone somewhere would read it differently than they did. Of all four of these men, which one do you think the show and the audience failed the most while they were still alive, and why? And if Daryl's 2018 post about depression had gone viral the moment he wrote it, instead of after his death, do you think it would have changed anything? Or do we only ever truly listen to people once it is too late? Share your thoughts with us in the comments section. Remember to like, share, and subscribe for more. Also, click the next video showing on your screen. You will enjoy it.